Hi, welcome to EPCC Talks. My name is Dr. Amber Archuleta Lucero. I wanted to let you know how grateful we are for your support, continuing to listen to us on SoundCloud, looking at us on YouTube. So today, yet another incredible show. I have a guest host with me that I'd like to introduce to you. This is Barbara Sanchez. This is my colleague from government. We're both at the same campus, an incredible individual. I have her co-hosting with me today. Soon, my other co-host, my permanent co-host, Professor Claudia Chacon-Haley, will be back with me. But right now, I would like to welcome Barbara to the show. This is her first time here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be here, Dr. A, and with Dr. Juárez. Thank you so much.
And today, listen, we are talking to Dr. Miguel Juárez. I think it may have been New Year's Eve, somewhere around the beginning of the year. I think I text Dr. Juárez just to say hello. And then we started a whole, hour and a half, 2-hour conversation about art, about his work. He was going to a conference. He's an activist. He's a professor of history. He is continuing to voice those important artists that are in our community all over. So today we have him officially at the podcast. So welcome, Dr. Miguel Juárez.
Thank you for this invitation.
Yeah. So let me start here like I always do. I want to talk to you just a tiny bit. Tell me a little bit about your childhood and your education.
Well, I was born in 1958. We lived what I remember is we lived out in the country. My father worked in agriculture for a man named Nick Abraham. And actually, my father was from Mexico. Mm-hmm. My father came to Mexico initially illegally. He was caught. I think he came as a young man, and he was caught by the Border Patrol and put in the jaula, or the cage. Mm-hmm. They contacted his family, and his family had to come and pick him up and take him back to Mexico. Mm-hmm. I think he really wasn't happy living there with his father, who maybe we really don't know that much how they lived and so forth. But his father had an avocado farm, and my father was going to be a farmer. Mm-hmm. But I don't think he wanted to be a farmer. So a second time he escaped home and came to La Frontera, was not initially very successful at crossing, was living in Juárez as a homeless person. Mm-hmm. Eating out of trash cans, and somebody, older lady, had pity on him, and she started to help him and all that. And eventually he was able to cross and then work in agriculture and so forth. And he actually met my mother in Juárez. They got married. We have pictures of their courtship and
nice
and everything. And so my father mostly worked as a laborer, and so we lived. After living out in the country, we lived in Segundo Barrio, in different, first, I think one of the earliest places we lived in was across from Tillman Health Clinic in a Presidio. And then after that, we moved to Barrio Quinto, or 5th Street, across from Roosevelt School. Mm-hmm. And then the last school that I attended before we moved was Eoy School.
Yeah.
When I was 10 in 1968, my parents bought a home in Hacienda Heights. And they bought the house for $10,000, and they had to pay $100 a month. And they were sweating it. They were saying $100 a month is a lot, you know. And so we became my father's gardeners. My father prided on him having a beautiful lawn. He planted an orchard of pecan trees in the back.
Nice.
He actually, back there they didn't have Lowe's and Home Depot where you could go buy sod. Right. And so my father went to the banks of the Rio Grande, and he borrowed the grass and replanted the Rio Grande grass in our lawn, and it took root. And it was one of the most beautiful lawns in the whole block. So, he had a green thumb. And so when we moved from Segundo Barrio to Hacienda Heights, in Segundo Barrio, we didn't have many African Americans at the schools. Mm-hmm. although historically African Americans have lived in Segundo Barrio because it was inexpensive to live there. And so I remember when I started class in the 4th grade at Hacienda Heights, I think they put me in the worst class, or it was like Animal House, you know. People were throwing spitwads at the teacher. They were laughing at her. They were cussing. They were getting into fights and all that. And I said, where am I, you know? So, but I just kind of, you know, I pretty much stayed quiet and kind of minded my own business. And so then after that, I went to Bel Air Junior High and then Bel Air High School. And it's very, very interesting how life circles back, because very recently I've become involved as a volunteer kind of consultant with a new group that has started called the East Side Central Coalition, which is basically its memberships are members of the black churches, black businessmen, and they've come up with the concept of Black Wall Street. There was a Black Wall Street.
Yes, there was.
Along Alameda. Black businesses, record stores, and so forth. And for the 2nd year in a row, they've done a tour of Black El Paso. The Camille Foundation provides buses.
I love
it's free. It's free.
Love that.
And so this year
we're going to have to give that information at the end of the show for the credits. That's
right.
People want to know about that.
And this year they asked me to be a tour guide.
Really?
Basically reading from a script. And so what I did is I also wanted to do Facebook Live and record it and do a video. So I went and bought, you know, like a selfie stick. I had another selfie stick, but I never used it. But I bought this one, and so I recorded it, and because people.
Where did you upload it to, Miguel?
No,
you have it still?
On social media.
Okay.
Yeah, social media, but somewhere I have a recording, but it's very rough. You know, it's not edited. Hello, it's not edited. And so it's not
editing's everything.
Yeah, editing. Yes, and so because before the actual tour, I was asking people, professional video people, do you think you could record this and upload it to Facebook? And they said, wow, we don't know, because we'll be on the bus and it might break up and all these. In other words, it was going to be very difficult. And I said, what the hell? I'll do it.
Yeah,
so anyway,
you did.
Yeah, and I did it. And so, but I'm walking around like, you know, right before the tour, they had donuts, and I was like, oh, I want a donut, and I was recording all this, you know. And so, and then in a certain point in time, I'm walking around, and I say, in high school, I was real nerdy. And so other people watched it said, we want to know how nerdy you were during high school.
No, it's fun to do that because I think you escape that you're recording yourself. You start telling the story. Right. And let me circle back because, you know, I have known you for a while now, and I truly am saying this from the heart. You know, you're one of the greatest storytellers that I know, but we never hear much about your story. And I know you're here to talk about other people's stories today, so we'll start there.
Okay.
So, Miguel, you've been doing a tremendous amount of work. You had your own TV show in the 1990s here, and you've been doing work with artists for a very long time. I told you off camera that if we go and we don't tell the entirety of the story, let's come back for part 2, part 3, part 4, up until you can get these stories about these amazing people out. So I know we're talking about art, we're talking about culture, we're talking about history, we're talking about the things all of us, I think, have in common, the things that we love. So tell me a little bit about initially what drove you to looking at that particular area of work, right? Because it is, I think, I'm going to be honest, probably the least that I don't know a lot about, you know, things like that. And I'm interested in what drew you there. And then I think we're going to talk about some people that you want to just kind of, you know, plug after we get through with this show. We'll have something in the background before the credits with actual things if they want to contact you, some work that you want to show. But tell me a little about what drew you there, and then then let's highlight some people that are important for us to talk about in terms of their lives and their contributions to this community, which we got to continue to uphold the voices in this community. So I'll leave it there, and then I know Barbara will want to talk to you.
Okay. Well, I think early on, I want to say that when I was a child, I was an artist. My mother tells me that as soon as I could hold a pencil, I was drawing. At home, we didn't have any blank paper. We didn't have any drawing paper. It was like, where does a working family get art supplies, And so I would draw on the back of photographs, black and white photographs, because it was a white surface. I still have some of those little drawings or whatever. And so that's why I started drawing. So my teachers in elementary school said, "Oh, you can draw," so they'd encourage me and so forth. And I think before we moved to Hacienda Heights, maybe I was 8 or 9, I was bugging my parents to take me to drawing classes at the former YMCA that's no longer there.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I did it, but I was going to art classes and
Good
I was
for
doing
you.
clay projects and all that. But I think maybe it was too expensive for my parents, so they maybe told me that the classes ended, and what did I know, so whatever. So I do remember I wanted to go back for my artwork or whatever, but they said, no, it's too far. We can't afford it. You know what I mean? So all through elementary school, I would do art. And then in 1985, a friend of mine by the name of Paul Ramirez actually was doing an exhibit, and I was an undergrad at UTEP, or I think I had graduated. And he was doing an exhibit at the Lincoln at the Lincoln Cultural Center that had a small gallery. And he used to work at the art center where they sell supplies. And he thought, you know what, instead of doing my art show, I'd like to do an art show of 10 artists from El Paso and 10 artists from Juárez.
Great, yeah.
And he asked me, would you help me? Because he knew that, I like doing things like that. So I said, I'll help you. So we started from scratch. We went to go see Alicia Chacon, who was a city representative, and we owe her a lot of gratitude because she bent over backwards to help us. We didn't even know about how to do this, but we did it. And the who's who of the art world that a lot of people have forgotten and they don't know their histories exhibited. Martha Amaya Arat, Ernesto Peregron Martinez, who had been a veteran, World War II, and you had Carlos Flores, Luis Jimenez, Mago Orona, and on and on and on. And it was a great experience.
It sounds like
the first time this had happened. Rudy Montoya, and then we went around and we wanted to do a poster, a full color poster. The design of the poster was designed by Antonio Piña, who's a painter. And so we needed it get scanned, and the printing and everything was donated because Rudy Montoya's name was on that poster. Yeah. And Rudy Montoya was loved by the advertising world, by the printing world. They knew who he was and a lot of those artists. And so we were successful, and we did a limited edition of 1,000 full-color posters.
Oh, man.
And I asked Paul if he could sign 100 of them, like 100, whatever.
Numbering them,
numbering them. And at the end of the exhibit, and since his artwork was on the poster, I exhibited in the exhibit, but Paul got a lot of the glory because it was his work and all that, and I was kind of bummed out. But he gave me the one of 100 posters signed. So,
how awesome
and I still have that actually. And I framed it, and it's there. I look at it, and I remember.
Good memories.
And then after that, we started organizing in houses of the artists to give shape to this organization. It was actually Antonio Piña that had attended a Knox conference in El Paso, and he saw that Knox was a national organization. So he decided to create an organization called the National Association of Chicano Arts, or NACA. But a lot of people didn't know NACA. What's NACA? You know how it is?
Yeah.
So we changed the name to the Juntos Art Association. And it's interesting because I was at the opening of the Mexican American Cultural Center, and I was sitting next to Maria Natividad, who has an exhibit. If you've had a chance to go, it's a beautiful exhibit, and it's a beautiful building. I'm looking forward to see how it starts to change the community, and how is it going to be different from the History Museum and from the Art Museum?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? You want something to have its own niche,
right,
and its own place,
right?
Because to copy something else, that doesn't make sense.
Yes. Well, Maria Natividad said when she was hanging her show that they came by and they said, perhaps we could do a panel on Juntos. And she says, you need to be part of it. And I said, hopefully, you know what I mean? Because now it's under new management.
Yes.
So anyway, but if not, what coming down to this interview today, I thought, what's really, really important is that I need to write all this down and publish it, because I have interviews with artists.
I know you do.
I have everything. And I was recently part of a project. I was invited to do an article about how the first generation of Mexican American artists, where they went to get educated.
Nice.
And
are you working on it now, or is it finished?
Well, I got involved with publishing my third book and teaching. It's just a lot. These days I feel like I'm running from project to project, and there's no time.
It happens.
And when do we get the time to watch Netflix, right?
Hey.
So, anyway,
real important things in life, Miguel. Come on.
I know, but you got to relax. Come on, you got to relax. And so, well, the project was given to someone else, and that's okay, because I thought, all over the country this was experienced. How does like the Royal Chicano Air Force, where were they educated? Where was Gilbert Luján or Magoo educated to be an artist? I mean, what was the reception? Well,
and how do you get in those spaces?
Right. How do you get into spaces, especially being the first Mexican Americans to go to art school? And then the women, how were the women treated? My wife was an art teacher. She's an educator. She was an educator, and she was an art teacher. She said she remembers going to art classes at UTEP and being told, you belong at home with your husband, cooking for them. You don't.
Wow.
I don't see you as an artist. They were told that. It was like, how dare they?
Yeah. Yes, so, I know. Yeah. So, and let me pivot a little bit. I know Barbara has some questions for you, and I want to come back and talk to you about some of your more current projects and some things that we need to keep an eye out for regarding your work. And I'll do that, but let me pivot to Barbara real quick.
Thank you, Dr. A. So, Dr. Juárez, you just mentioned about your wife, right? Attending art classes and like having to deal with all of that. How is it for you, or how was it for you to be the first one in your family to have a PhD? How was the family culture that pushed you, or what pushed you?
It's tied like to art, because at some point in time, I like to draw. I don't do that much of it. I like to do photography. I took photography at an early age in high school. And then I also want to say I got involved with an organization called the Bel Air Key Club, which was a kind of civic community organization. And so I thought, well, I'm not really going to be a great artist, but what I want to do is I want to document.
Tell stories.
I want to write about it.
Yeah.
I want to write about these artists whom I've known, whom I've worked with, who I helped in many ways. I want to be that person, because nobody else is. I think that was really important in the early 80s when we founded the Juntos Art Association. We went to go talk to the director of the art museum, and we asked, why don't you show more local Latino artists in the museum? And he told us, it's not your time. And then we stepped out of that meeting and we said, we're going to have to make it our time. So we went and so I've been both like a presenter of this history and this culture that no one really, and they weren't writing about it either. So we had to write about it. So we had to write about it, and we had to talk about it and so forth. And, you know, in El Paso, that was, I wish we had started a Mexican-American Cultural Center back in 1985. Why did it wait so long? What happened? I mean, in El Paso, and this is what I think a lot of people that come from out of town sometimes have trouble with. There's a high percentage of the Mexican-American community and the Mexicanos who have come from Mexico. They're here. And of course, there's other ethnicities. You know, there's also African Americans. But the majority, not until recently, hasn't really had input into this, into these processes. And we're talking about city funding. We're not talking about private funding. You know, if it's private funding like the Getty or something like that, then they decide what direction to go.
Right.
But we have had Latino mayors and representatives. Why? Of course, it has to do with money, and so now I'm hoping that there be that input from people, from the average person. If the average person wants to go in and do some sort of cooking show or a cooking podcast or something like that, they can. But I mean, who's going to decide?
For sure. Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, you're straddling two things. You know you need the funding.
Yeah.
You know that you want to put out something incredible. But then you got to be careful at who's funding you.
Right.
And what are the expectations of that funding?
Right.
So I think that's where the scary part becomes, right? Because we understand this. And let me say this too. I was thinking about this while you were saying this. You know, you were telling this wonderful story earlier before we came on camera about you doing a tour and how you were using your own phone to kind of document that. That's, I think, Miguel, the beauty of the current and contemporary times, right? All of us are directors, all of us are filmmakers,
right.
all of us are storytellers, because we have an opportunity now to use our phones to tell that particular story. So I'm hoping like you. My heart is where, you know, we our voices are heard. We can push just a little bit more, because you and Barbara, you know, both being from El Paso, have stories to talk. I'm coming from another place, being here 19 years this year, but we need to hear more of what you're doing, and more of what Barbara knows about her growing up here, her experiences here in the community. And so I'm hoping maybe, you know, the social media aspect and tenet is something we can utilize for that.
Yes, well, I think it's important for people to tell their own stories, because, and I hope that the Mexican-American Cultural Center provides that opportunity for people to tell their story, whether it is in cooking,
yes,
in exhibiting artwork, in creating a podcast, and creating their music, and there's just so much. But also that they not forget where we come from. We come from Latin America, from Mexico. I know a lot of people do not go to Juárez, but maybe we could bring Juárez here.
I try to convey that to people, you know, that are not from our community, you know, what our community looks like, and the important ties and connections and linkages that we have. And, you know, I live 10 minutes away, you know, from the border. I feel special because I'm now connected to an incredible place that I call a diamond in the desert for me, from a personal perspective. But let me ask you right now, what are you working on? What is it that we need to keep an eye out for? And what is it that average people that want to get involved, that are hearing about what you're doing and want to connect with you, which will have all Dr. Juárez's information at the end of the podcast. But what are some things that we need to be watching out for as it relates to your work?
As I mentioned earlier, this new organization, the East Side Central Coalition, they've just opened up a little museum called the Living Museum in the in Estine's barber shop. Remember there was
Wait, tell me where that is.
I think
You know where that is, Barb?
No, I don't.
Estine Davis was one of the only female barbers in the whole city forever, and she was black. And well, she's still very much alive. Sorry, she's still very much alive. And her son is Mike Davis, and Mike Davis created this organization. They had an opening a few weeks ago, and it was it's like history reborn. And before I-10, the that whole kind of central area was very walkable. The soldiers would walk down to Central El Paso, and they would go to buy records. There used to be a record store there. They used to go to the bars, the restaurants. It's when you go on one of these tours, it's just amazing the profound impact that the black community had. But unfortunately, when they created US 54, I-10, Highway 110, the Chamizal Freeway, that devastated the black community. It broke it apart in pieces. Some individuals, not too many of them, went to Northeast. The majority of them went to Hacienda Heights. And it's interesting, there's going to be an opening of an exhibit. It's called Hacienda Heights. Actually, the black community used to get together and have their own homecoming. They called it the Heights. They would get together and so forth. And I remember in the 70s, there was also friction because African Americans were displaced because of the highway, and then they resettled around Beller High School, and then they tried to, what individuals have told me, that Beller was very white, and eventually they went up to Eastwood. And then also, but that was a period of like the movimiento, the Mexican-American movimiento. And so you have basically two groups trying to find voice and place, and there was some friction.
And at a time when people didn't do that.
Right.
Somebody else was telling stories
Right,
about
right.
communities, right?
Right,
People weren't doing their own
Right.
things. So that's, I think we forget that portion. You talked
Yes.
about the 70s, the 80s, and 90s. Yeah, there wasn't this social media, and
Right.
you got on
No,
Instagram
right.
and you told. It
Yeah.
was hard to do.
Yeah, it was like communities were living kind of like a cloistered life. Only their friends, only their family. You really didn't go meet someone that was totally different from you because it could be dangerous, And so, and actually, this fall, my publisher finally told me, Miguel, your book's never going to be perfect. Turn it in now, or we'll miss a deadline of publishing it in fall of 2025. So I already turned it. It's being edited. So now
We're excited.
So I'm working. Well, you asked me earlier about the PhD and going through that whole. It's a funnel we have to go through, and it gets narrower and narrower as you kind of when it's almost near the end, because not too many people have gone through that. And so I'm excited, but I think we always worry about getting it wrong. But I know there are many different kinds of opinions for work of this nature, but there's also a lot that has not been said or written about
It's
at
at the
all.
surface. I feel it's just at the surface,
Yeah,
seriously.
It's just at the surface. And I kind of wish I had more time. I had more time because so much more, I think, needed to be said. But no, it's exciting. It's a little bit scary too, because I'm actually, saying things and talking about things that have never been talked about ever. And I'll give you a real quick example. I was invited to a conference last year. It was the California Association Trails or something like that. And a friend of mine invited me, and there were no Mexican American people at that conference. And so, and I was talking to them about redlining and racial covenants. And not too many people had ever heard of that.
Interesting.
Because it never affected them.
Right.
They weren't ever victims of redlining or racial covenants. And right then and then I said, this is a new area. I could go and give presentations to people who have never heard of this.
Yeah.
So, but, and so it's, I think, in El Paso, I don't think people have heard of it either.
Yeah. Well, even in government, I don't think. I mean, we're going to talk about gerrymandering and things like that, but getting into specific details about those things. I mean, I feel it's kind of less and less talked about and understood actually. And then let me say this: all of the Dr. Juárez's email information and social media stuff will be available. As we wrap this up today, I want to tell you from the heart, I am super grateful that you are here. I feel, I'm a fan of your work, of your activism, of your heart mostly. This has been from the heart, this journey that you've taken, right? So when you see something authentic and original, and like you said, beautifully flawed, because it's in the making. So I feel from being a friend of yours that, watching you, cheering you on continually, yet with another book, that, I want you to know that this platform is always open to you. You've had your own TV show. This is nothing new to you. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of mine and Barbara's hearts that we're grateful that you're here. One last question that I always ask that I never say that I'm going to ask until I ask. Okay. What advice would you give to a younger Miguel?
Write more. Write more, but also enjoy it. Because sometimes it's hard because to kind of balance what you must do to survive versus what you want to do to dream. So.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Barb, any last words?
Wonderful. No, I just want to say thank you so very much, Dr. A, for having me here. Thank you, Dr. Juárez, for allowing me to know more of you. I'm your fan, so thank you.
Two fans at the table.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, we're wrapping it up today. Thank you again from EPCC Talks, all Dr. Juárez's information, book information, how to get a hold of him. I'd like to thank Barbara Sanchez today for coming. I asked her immediately, like she always does, accepts, and is a great privilege for me to be sitting next to her. So we will see you next time from EPCC Talks. Bye.
For more information on Black El Paso history tours, contact Michael Davis at michaelep@cs.com. And for more information about El Paso's rich history, contact Dr. Miguel Juárez at migueljuarez.soho@gmail.com.